Welcome back, everyone, to more X4 Foundations content here at Pit Gaming. And today's video is going to start a different series of videos for X4 Foundations here on the channel. Up until this point, we've been doing a lot of gameplay surrounding the different elements of the game, from trading and mining, setting up auto miners, auto traders, dealing a lot with stations, that sort of thing. What I want to do now is to go in a little different direction and test out some different variables that I have in mind. But before we get into that, I want to sort of back up and give you a little bit of background about how I got to this conclusion and why I decided to go in this direction at this time. Over the past probably 2-3 weeks, maybe even a little bit longer, I've been doing a lot in this game on some of my saves. Now, I generally run multiple saves, multiple playthroughs where I do different things. On one of the playthroughs, I might not have any mods whatsoever. Other playthroughs, I might use 1 or 2 mods that I really like for a specific purpose. And then others, I might use several mods. So I like to run a lot of different things because I like to test a lot of different avenues of playing the game, a lot of different ways of making money, and a lot of different ways of generally having fun in the game and finding out what I enjoy most about playing the game. So that has led me to at least 2 different playthroughs reaching a point where the game essentially could not take any more. The game started crying uncle on me, and the way I could tell is that a few things started happening. First and foremost, the easiest way of telling is when the frames per second start to drop. Now, normally, at the beginning of a playthrough and even toward the middle sections of a playthrough, I'm getting a constant 60 frames per second, which is the most that my monitor can really deal with anyway. So a constant 60 frames per second, no issues. But as the playthrough starts to reach a certain level, once I have a certain amount of activity going on, and keep in mind that amount of activity is not just what I'm doing. It's not just the stations and ships and so on that I have working. It's the AI. So some of the mods that really help out the AI with the economy and so on really introduce a lot more calculations to the game, because now the AI are building a lot more ships. They're doing a lot more trading, as well as me building ships and stations and trading and all of that sort of thing. So what I want to do going forward we'll see how many videos. Maybe it only takes a few videos to get done what I want to get done with the testing. Maybe it takes several videos. We'll just have to see how all that works out. But what I'm going to do is, you can see at the top of the screen, okay, I've got a baseline save here that we're going to use to get started in each of our playthroughs for testing purposes. And so just so you'll know how I got to this save, you can see there's very little time involved in the save. What I wanted to do is I wanted to get somewhere between 4 and 5 million credits set up to get us started, because we're obviously going to need some credits to get started, whether we're going to start mining, trading, building stations, whatever the case is. We're going to need some money to do it. So I decided to go and mine crystals for somewhere between 4 and 5 million credits. And so what I did was I used the mining crystals mod to get that accomplished as quickly as I could, so that we can get started with the testing. But once I got that done, I came out and I removed all the mods. There are no mods for this initial test, 0 mods. And in fact, I'm not going to be doing throughout all of these tests, I'm not going to be doing anything within the game. The goal is to set up the AI, to set up miners, traders, stations, and so on, and just see how much the game can handle. And the easiest way for me to do that for testing purposes is to take myself out of it. So I'm not going to be running around mining crystals or mining asteroids or trading or doing missions and so on. I'm not going to be doing any of that. It's all going to be up to the AI to see what they can handle and how far we can get before we start to see issues. So with that in mind, this first playthrough, as I mentioned, is going to have 0 mods, but I want you guys to keep in mind as we progress with this series, it's not really about how much money we're able to accumulate or the actual number of ships or stations or whatever that we're able to accumulate. It's really all about how the different number of mods or tactics affect the grand scheme of things in this game. In other words, just certain mods mean that you're not going to get as much playthrough. It might be a lot more fun, but you know going in that you're probably not going to get as long of a playthrough because the game's finally going to reach a point where it's too much. Too many calculations, too much activity going on. So that's the point of this series. Here in today's video, we're going to get started on our playthrough with no mods, and we're not going to be building any stations in this playthrough. We're simply going to start out, we're going to get a bunch of miners, and then we're going to go from there. We'll see what happens. So let's get it started. All right, now that we're spawned into the world, you already know how much money that we have. But just as a refresher, 4.1, almost 4.2 million credits. You can also see property owned. We've got our starter ship, and that's it. So we have no equipment. We have no stations, no anything beyond that. So let's go ahead and come down here because it's time to build some ships, and I always like to be down in this area so that I can watch them being built. So to get ourselves started, I'm actually going to come into the menu, buy ships, and we're going to get started in this particular playthrough with miners. So we're going to set up some miners. Again, you can see I have no relationship with anyone at this point. So I'm going to set up some drill vanguards. And let's see, I have a Pit Gaming loadout, but I might change that a little bit just so we can get as many of these as we can get. So, okay, engine, I kind of like using that engine because it gives it a pretty good travel speed. But let's go ahead and back off on some of these other things. Now, generally, I like to equip these guys pretty nicely, but for our purposes here, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go cheap on them for the most part here. Now, we do want the mining turrets, obviously, on our miners. That helps out things a little bit. So we'll go ahead and stick with that. But our docking computer, I will give them one just in case for some reason I decide to ride around with one just for the fun of it. But we're going to give them the basic equipment for the most part. Not a whole lot going on there. No consumables. We're not going to be having them drop nav beacons or resource probes for the most part. Satellites wouldn't be a bad idea, but I'm probably going to do those, if I use any at all, I'll probably do those myself because they use computing power as well. So let's see, service crew, I tell you what, I'm going to give them each one service crew, one Marine, and that's it, just so they'll have a little bit of crew. But that's going to get us about 450,000 for each one of these, and we're going to use up about 4 million in credits worth of this. So you can see how how many of these we're going to actually be able to get. We're going to be able to get 9 of them. So not quite 10, but we are going to be able to get 9. Let's go ahead and get those guys going. And immediately you can see, wow, we've got all sorts of stuff that is happening. Okay, you can see some of these are going to be really quick. Others are going to have to wait a little while in the queue, which is perfectly fine. Hopefully, they have enough in order to get started. All right, there's a few that they were already working on. We've got a little bit of docking space that's being taken up right now, but I like it. So the game is already going, and you can see we have got lots of construction that is happening. Okay, so with that in mind, let's come back out to the map, because I want to show you guys, because very shortly we're going to have some miners that we're going to need to find jobs for. So what I've done to get the game started, again, I haven't traded or mined or anything other than what I told you guys about at the very beginning of the video. But what I did was I took one quick trip around the highway system. Okay, so we started over here in Black Hole Sun. I flew over to the highway system and took one complete turn around just so we can open up a few stations that way and give our miners somewhere to trade once they get full. Also, I might do a little bit more exploring as time goes forward, again, just to see how much the game allows us to do. But for right now, it's all about miners. So we're setting up a mining crew. And so let's go ahead and start some of these guys. Now, if we take a look at what we have available, of course, we've got Nevidium, we've got ore, and we've got silicone as far as the solid Now, what about liquid? Have we opened up any liquid? Yes, we actually have. We've got some methane, some helium. Okay, so as we continue to work through, we'll actually add in some of the liquid miners as well, the gas miners. Okay, so let's get these guys started. We'll set up a few of them on Nevidium. We'll set up a few on ore, ice, and so on. Because again, it's not so much about money as it is about just seeing how many ships and how much activity we can generate. So Nevidium, which of course will be a great source of income early on, but then will quickly go away as we get on into the game. And at that point, we'll simply move these guys from Nevidium over to one of the other ores. All right, so we've got this guy set up. Let's go ahead and get him started. He'll take care of the undocking. And I'm going to rename him NV Miner number 1. Okay, let's go to the next guy. We'll call him NV Miner number 2 for obvious reasons. And then we'll get him up and going as well. Auto mine. And for now, you're only mining Nevidium. Okay, there we go. We come back in. So now we've got a couple of miners for Nevidium. Let's go ahead and set up. Let's go ahead and set up a few on ice. Now, ice is going to be very little money for us. It's not terribly profitable. I usually only mine ice as a secondary source of income as I get on into the game when I'm simply trying to diversify, or I need it for one of my stations. But for right now, this will be perfectly fine for our purposes. So we'll call this one, as you might have guessed, Ice Miner 1. Okay, so then let's move into our next guy. So of course, this is going to accomplish a few things. First and foremost, it's going to get us started on building our fleet so that we can ultimately find out how many of these the game will allow. Or what we might run into is at some point we've simply satisfied all of the demand, and I'll either have to try to find other stations by traveling around, or I'll simply call the test right there, and we will have learned the information we've learned. And of course, the second thing is going ahead and starting all these miners is going to be a great way to set up a nice income. Since I don't plan on getting involved in any of this going forward, simply letting the AI take care of it, this is going to be a great way to get that started. And let's see, did I get this guy? Of course I didn't. I had a feeling that I forgot to set this up. All right, so this is an ore miner. So we're going to let him go as far as he can go to sell off his wares. All right, let's go ahead before I forget. And this guy is also going to be mining ore. Okay, so the naming convention that I'm using is simply to help me out and give me an idea of how many of each of these that I have. That's really about it. Other than that, it really doesn't matter to me what they're mining. All right, so we've got 2 more. That should be perfect because we'll have these guys mine some silicon. Okay, let's get these guys up and running. So already we're going to start to make our mark on the universe by adding in quite a few miners to get going. Because the money, once it starts to come in, particularly at the very beginning when Nevidium is a worthwhile opportunity, then we're going to start to have some money come in. So this is going to start to really multiply pretty quickly. Because we've already seen that we can get one of these medium-sized miners for about 450,000 credits, so we'll be bringing in the money at a pretty good rate. One of the exciting things about this particular test is the understanding that I don't know how it's going to turn out, and I love that aspect of of the game when I can try out something that I haven't done in a certain fashion and just see what happens. So as of right now, we have 2 miners for ice, 2 for Nevidium, 2 for ore, and 2 for silicon. So as we back out, let's go ahead and turn off that display. We don't really need that right now. And you can see that our guys are going to start to spread out. They're going to head down here to second contact. And some of them, let's see where else they're going. Okay, that's all I see for now. Looks like some of the others are just getting started. So they're going to head out into Argon Prime. And we're going to let them do their business, and we'll be back in just a little bit to see what kind of progress they've made. All right, so we're about 10 minutes into the game, roughly 10 or 12 minutes into the game, and we had about $870,000 already accumulated by our miners. So what I've done, you can see just in front of me, I've purchased 2 new miners. These, however, are gas miners. So we're going to get these guys set up, the Sunder Vanguard. Let's come in and let's get these guys all set up. Auto mine, and we're going to do, actually I've forgotten, which one do we want to do? Let's come back out, broaden our map a little bit, and let's see, where do we want to go? Okay, there we go. So we can do, helium is pretty good, methane's pretty good. Okay, let's do methane first. It gets a little bit more credits, a nice size demand there. So we'll get started with some methane. All right, there we go. Last one on the list. And we'll let this guy go as far as he needs to get the job done. So his name will now become methane miner number 1. And then our other guy will become methane miner number 2. There we go. So far, so good. Money is coming in, and I am very interested to see how quickly this will become an issue. I think we got a good little while before it becomes a problem, but you just never know. And of course, ultimately, that's what we're here to figure out. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the interesting things that I'd like to hear from you guys is if you've encountered these similar type of issues. Have you had a save where you reached a point where the frames per second were just dropping to a point where the game was essentially unplayable? As I mentioned earlier, the frames per second for me have dropped to anywhere, it's below 10, so usually 6 to 8 frames per second, regardless of what I do. There's no way to change it, no way to increase it. There you can see we just had some more Nevidium get sold off. But I'd like to hear from you guys. Have you had this type thing happen? If so, how far along were you? How many hours into the save? How many ships or stations and so on did you have? Because I don't have the strongest CPU, so I'm interested to see how much of a factor does that play in it. So with that in mind, I think we're going to leave it here for today here in our first video. Again, you can see money is rolling in. But here in the first video, I just wanted to establish with you guys exactly what I'm trying to accomplish in these playthroughs. And we'll play around. We'll have some fun with these playthroughs as time goes on. But that'll do it here for day number 1. Our very first testing involving only using miners and no mods. So thank you very much for joining me. And stay tuned as we will continue our gameplay of X4 Foundations.